Singapore has moved swiftly against what it describes as a foreign online influence campaign targeting its Indian community on its soil. Authorities have ordered social media platforms to block access to content that allegedly originated from China and promoted inflammatory narratives about Indians in Singapore. The government says the campaign is aimed at undermining racial harmony and social cohesion in one of the world's most diverse societies, and Singapore's authorities have invoked the Online Criminal Harms Act to curb the spread of online content targeting the Indian community. And the Singapore Police Force has issued disabling directions to platforms including YouTube, Facebook, and even X, requiring them to block local access to the identified posts. Officials say the content threatens social harmony and racial cohesion. According to Singapore's Ministry of Home Affairs, the narratives first surfaced within the Chinese information space before it spread across social media. The content suggested that Singapore was facing anxiety over its cultural identity and ethnic politics. While authorities stopped short of directly accusing Beijing, they said that the material likely originated from China-linked information networks. And Singapore says the online campaign was not just misinformation but an attempt to undermine the country's multicultural foundations. Authorities have flagged content claiming that Singapore was being overrun by Indians and warned that such narratives are designed to create distrust between communities. The government has strongly rejected xenophobia and also nativism, describing foreign efforts to exploit ethnic differences as unacceptable, because officials have urged citizens to remain vigilant, verify information before sharing it, and reject any attempts by external actors to sow seeds of division within Singapore's diverse society. And to help us understand what really is going on, we have Ambassador Suresh K. Goel, former Indian diplomat, joining me live on this broadcast. A very good afternoon to you, Ambassador. How do you look at these posts, the social media content triggering the Indian community there, targeting them and also trying to sow seeds of, division on Singapore soil? How do you look at these posts, sir?
Good afternoon to you.
Yes, sir.
It's interesting. In fact, since my diplomatic career actually began in Singapore, where I had gone in 1980 to learn Chinese language, and obviously I willy-nilly went into the history of Singapore, the creation of Singapore per se. It will be interesting to know how Chinese actually played a part in creation of Singapore. Not totally out of context here. Malaysia actually at that time, which contained Singapore, threw Singapore out, and Lee Kuan Yew did not want Singapore to be separated because for him, and separate independent economic existence of Singapore was untenable. But Singapore was thrown out because the Malaysian Chinese party, which was actually mostly based in Singapore, was propagating communism in that area and using guerrilla tactics to foment the same kind of disturbances as we see these days in many other countries. And therefore now, in today's context, again to have some kind of a destabilizing campaign coming from mainland China is nefarious. It's not just strange, but it is actually nefarious, clearly indicating that the attempt by the Chinese Communist Party or the rulers in China to control, in a sense, all areas globally where there is a Chinese population, it is a project which they have not given up on. And that goes on to wherever there is a Chinese community. You have heard about the Chinese running their own prisons, interrogation centers in the USA through the Chinese people, and now Singapore. Therefore, in a sense, the decision taken by the government of Singapore is absolutely first rate, superb, laudable, I would say, because they have realized and they understand that it has to be nipped in bud to maintain that kind of national integrity of the country as it is. Otherwise, any kind of ethnic division in Singapore would be not just harmful, but would create fissures and fragmentation in a small country like Singapore. So I would say good step taken by the Singapore government.
But Ambassador, this is not just a social media issue. This is a full blown narrative war that is you know unfolding in Asia. And why is the Indian community, particularly in Singapore, that is being targeted? For our viewers who are just tuning in, if you could
Well,
decipher that.
well, I think in a sense, uh, in terms of economic profile, in terms of professional profile, the Indian community in Singapore is known to be a successful group of people. They have contributed tremendously to the Singaporean economic spectrum, both in terms of technology, in terms of GDP, you name it. And they have worked together very well as part of Singapore. And therefore, to create the division between the majority Chinese community and the Indian community, which is the third largest community in Singapore, if they succeed in creating the division, that's a surest way of really breaking up Singapore again. And therefore, uh, I'm not surprised that they were targeting Indian. As far as the other community is concerned, uh, it doesn't make any sense. Malaysia is right next door with the majority Malay people there. Indonesia is right next door. I don't think they can succeed in fragmenting the Malay people, but they can certainly try and to create that division between Indian community and the Chinese community.
That's right, Ambassador. Let me also bring in Kanishk Ghosh, cybersecurity expert. A very good afternoon to you, Kanishk. What are the key indicators that usually help investigators determine whether this particular online campaign originated from a foreign source? Because Singaporean authorities are saying that they are suspecting this to be originated from China, but they're not, going on official record and blaming Beijing for it.
They would never go on official record and blame Beijing for it because it is going to be a diplomatic misfire. We need to understand there are influence operations which are run by People's Liberation Army across the world, and this is Singapore. First time Singapore government has taken the step forward to block it and take it down. And these operations are run throughout the world by PLA sources to malign India's image or Indians which are living abroad. The key message that they want to send out is that the Indian community should not be playing an active role in financially contributing to Singapore's growth, and they should be seen as a separatist group rather than being part of the community there. And Indians have been contributing to Singapore's economy for a very long time and are doing financially quite well. So these are measures to isolate India and isolate Indians who are staying abroad. You would see similar messaging happening in other parts of the world as well. And China is very good at these information warfare, influence operations, narrative propaganda, which are particularly narrated in a way that it comes out as if this is happening by itself. But if you go down deep, when we do our investigations at Athenian Tech, we find out that using open source intelligence that these operate from different part of the world. Same issue you would find impacting Taiwan as well. So there would be voices which will appear to be coming from within Taiwan but would be operating from the mainland. So Chinese are very good at this deception campaign, and they do it on a regular basis to ensure that countries like India get impacted. Even during Operation Sindhu, they had put out campaigns of promoting a fake narrative of 6 Rafales going down, and that was done from Chinese handles. So a lot of times Pakistani and Chinese work in tandem to ensure that there is frequency alignment. And particularly in this scenario, it's great that the Singapore authorities have caught this campaign and have taken it down. You would also see these campaigns being originated in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, particularly targeting Indians. So India has to take an active stance on ensuring that its people who are abroad, they don't become part of such hate campaigns.
Kanishk, how effective are these platform level restrictions that Singapore has, imposed, and content blocking measures in stopping such narratives? How effective are they?
See, Singapore, whenever they take such measures, they do it at a national scale. So within Singapore, these are quite effective. But if you look at outside Singapore, if someone's watching, they won't be effective. So they have done blocking within Singapore. So anyone who would be accessing this content within Singapore won't be able to access this information, but anyone trying to access it outside or anyone who uses VPNs will be able to access this kind of content. So the better way is to take down such content rather than blocking it. Blocking is a temporary measure, and a lot of time blocking can be avoided by using VPN channels. And the narrative which is spread outside the world is not segregated. It is only within Singapore that they have tried to restrict this content. So instead of blocking, I think takedown is a better measure for any kind of such hate campaigns which are put in.
Ambassador, how should India look at these foreign influence campaigns targeting Indians living in in foreign soil? How should New Delhi look at this, and how are we supposed to act on this?
Uh, Good question. There would be a temptation for the government of India at an official level to intervene in the development in Singapore. I don't think they should. It's a matter for Singapore to deal with, and Singapore is dealing with the whole issue in the best possible manner that they can. Any kind of intervention or any kind of even a hint from India to that impact would only make it more messy, really. So we should keep away from that. We should focus really in making sure that this kind of a campaign, hate campaign, does not begin to intrude into Indian politics. We need to be very careful because, as a democratic country, managing the party politics, managing the country's political democratic dynamics, and not to leave the flank open for any kind of accusations is very important. It's a
About the
very
interests
delicate
of
task.
Indian citizens living abroad, isn't that also important for the government?
But they are Indian citizens. No, they're not Indian citizens. They're Singapore citizens.
Okay.
They are Indian nationals, but Singapore citizens. And Singapore government is taking care of it, really. And I think, yes, in a sense, we think of Indian diaspora whenever these things happen. But to become obsessively indulging with this can sometimes boomerang. We need to be careful in this matter. Singapore is doing well. I agree that maybe blocking or taking down the content might be a better way of dealing with it, but you know how difficult it is, really. So let us leave it there and let us see how it goes. Incidentally, one thing you should be aware that why has the agency in China chosen Singapore? Because in Southeast Asia, Singapore is one country where the majority population is of Chinese origin. And the party, Chinese Communist Party, considers all Chinese living abroad to be a legitimate part of their own operations. Let us not get into the same kind of a miscalculation.
Kanishk, over the last decade, we've seen a shift from traditional cyber attacks to psychological and now information warfare. How dangerous is it?
No, it is equally dangerous. If you look at in Singapore, the People's Liberation Army has been trying to isolate Indians. There's also undercurrent where they want Indians who are living there to go back. So a lot of affluent Indians who are there, they have been trying to be isolated in that part of the world through such hate campaigns, through the undercurrent, through social media. But kudos to Singapore government that they have been able to unearth this and get this taken down. But there will be many more channels. This is just one. There will be many more moves which would be played to ensure that the people who have an Indian origin who are staying there in Singapore and are contributing financially and doing well, they could be isolated. So that's one of the key things, and this is not going down right now. You would see more campaigns coming out. You would see more methods being used, particularly to target Indian origin people. So what government must do is that India also must take this up diplomatically to ensure that there is enough voice which is being put forward, particularly to Singapore government to tackle this. And we must come out strongly to ensure that the Indian community is seen as a strong voice and not seen someone which is weak or malign to any such campaign that is coming out. So it's important that the messaging is sound from the Indian community side as well, and the MEA also takes a stands on this and puts out certain measures or takes it up diplomatically.
Ambassador, if these incidents continue to rise, can these affect regional diplomatic relations if foreign involvement is eventually established?
Hello, I'm sorry, I lost you for a moment.
Ambassador, I was saying that, if incidents like these campaigns increase, will it not affect the regional diplomatic relations if foreign involvement is eventually established? Because we've seen time and again that such info war that is being waged across the world against Indians and Indian community members, and in India as well, we've seen so many misinformation campaigns. What happens when, foreign involvement, the hidden hands are completely revealed? What happens to the diplomatic relations in the region?
We need to be very careful. There is no doubt whatsoever that China, as a country trying to increase its influence in the region, both in the Pacific as well as globally, will resort to all kinds of measures to essentially become the predominant power in almost everywhere. Where they are going wrong and what they should be doing in terms of any action which lies purely within their own territory. We should not do the same mistake again here. Singapore is a friendly government. Please do remember that when we became the summit partner of ASEAN, it was Lee Kuan Yew who had taken the initiative in this. Singapore considers India as a successful, great democracy, and therefore, in that sense, we should we should work together with Singapore in limiting these kind of influential or influencing campaigns rather than seem to be advising or intervening. That's very, very important. I'm sure that as the time goes by, and if we are active in terms of letting other countries know what China is up to, they will understand.
Kanish, do you think that these foreign influence operations are exploiting algorithms and even social media engagement patterns to boost their misinformation campaigns across different platforms?
They do. See, these are combined influence operations. It is not just on one platform, it is on multiple platforms. The content would be created from one platform and it will go out to other platforms, and then you will use a network of AI based botnets to spread it further. It will appear that these campaigns will to be coming across as something which is very normal. But if you go behind, do open source intelligence, you will find out that these are being done by cyber threat actors across the mainland from China. And you would see private companies who've been given large contracts for running these campaigns, particularly to showcase their location as Singapore, whereas they would be sitting in mainland China and doing these operations. And this is what the Singapore government has been able to bust so far. The other thing that you will find is a lot of these botnets would appear as humans because their profiles would be created in a manner that they would appear to be Singapore nationals. But the whole job of these AI-based botnets is to spread venom against Indian community, and they would do it again and again. The campaigns would appear in a manner that they would be so real, but behind it there would be soft messaging targeting, which is being created in a manner that it could evade a normal human. And these are psychological warfare operations, influence operations, which are done. And China is a master at this craft. So today, the whole part is about taking this content down, which is extremely important rather than just blocking it. Because if you block it at one part of the world, it'll come out from another platform. So once you block some part of the platform, you would say that these would appear in short reels on other platforms or would be sent through another method, through links on messaging platforms. So the best way is to how do you ensure that all of these campaigns are particularly uh, done intelligence ops on, you have OSINT, you have run forensics on, and these are taken down. That's the best way to look at it. And you have strong social media guidelines coming out and those being enforced. And I believe Singapore is very good at some of these guidelines. The only thing is about doing it on a regular basis, not just one time basis, because these campaigns, if they are happen now, they are taken down, they would come back again.
That's right. And Ambassador, if it can happen with Indian origin citizens, it can happen across multicultural societies. So how vulnerable are they to externally driven, disinformation campaigns like this one?
Very, very. And that's the reason uh, so parties like CCP, which work on basically one single unification kind of a thing, unified agenda, they will exploit the multiplicity or the multiple cultural diversity of the other countries, ethnic diversities to achieve their own aims. And therefore, they need to be very, very careful that this ethnic diversity, this cultural diversity does not give way. That also becomes the main security for the democratic societies like Singapore and India.
Kanishk, how does this entire process really happen once the social media posts start trickling in, and then how do they notice why aren't these online platforms flagging these racial content and also misinformation content that is creeping into the internet? Why aren't the platforms doing it?
See, social media platforms today rely on their own methods. So, for example, Meta used to rely on community notes.
Okay.
Today, these organizations which run influence operations have mastered this art and are able to evade their algorithms. So before a AI algorithm which is developed by a company like Meta or YouTube finds it out, these influence operations shift narrative that will appear and start broadcasting news which appears to be normal. And soon they will start shifting. So it's a mix of news. Sometimes they would be targeting the Indians and then they will try and broadcast something which is normal. So to a AI based algorithm, it will appear that there is a normal user who's trying to push content. With your use of artificial intelligence and machine learning, it's quite possible right now to evade some of these methods which have been put forward by social media platforms. And social media platforms have been reducing their human staff in this domain. So globally, if you look at the trust and safety network of Meta, that has gone massive decline. We've also seen trust and safety network of platforms like Google X. They also have massively declined. So most of these tech companies have been trying to invest more on AI infrastructure and reducing human staff. And that's where the gap comes in. While they're trying to reduce staff, some of these social media fake campaigns and narratives are increased by these threat actor groups because they know that it is not a priority for social media companies. Ultimately, once there is intervention from the government, these social media companies try and look at all of these more seriously.
But Kanishk, what are these gaps and how ready is our infrastructure, not just ours, but across the world? How ready is it to take on the future of this warfare?
See, ultimately, until and unless the government doesn't come forward and puts stringent measures or puts pressure on social media platforms, it's very difficult to take down such content or block such content. It is only through global pressure or through pressure of the government that these social media platforms look at these issues more seriously. Otherwise, they are today heavy investing in AI infrastructure to monetize their own content or monetize their own business models right now. So it is not a priority for social media companies until and unless you don't have governments playing a active role. So you need more AI governance. You need more active laws which make these social media platforms accountable for this kind of content. And it is only after strong pressure from governments that these companies try and put more teams. Otherwise, they are trying to reduce staff in this space.
Ambassador, my final question to you, your closing comments on, what really India and other democracies can learn, not from the incident, but from Singapore's, stringent and, direct action. What can we learn?
First of all, uh, how to basically keep the diversity, the multipolarity of their own politics together, number one. And number two, carrying on from what Kanishka was saying just now, I think there is a strong need to have a code of ethics for this kind of platforms, social media platforms, and to make sure that these social media platforms, they go by, nobody should restrict their work, but they should observe certain ethics in terms of what passes through their platforms. It should not become a free for all that anybody can come, artificial intelligence, the inspired content just comes and puts it. It does leave a huge impact on the population and that does need to be basically guided, if not controlled.
Right, Ambassador Goel and Kanish Gaur, thank you for joining me on
Thank
this
you.
riveting conversation on this important issue. And Singapore has handled it very well so far. That's what Ambassador Goel and Kanish Gaur have stated. And this is, this is something that the world will also have to take inspiration from on cracking down against these information war campaigns.